In Oklahoma State sports talk and opinions on sports from around the country.
That's right. Listen up. Hey, listen up. You.
It's Jason Elmquist.
Today, I'm a mild-mannered reporter for the newspaper.
And Patrick Wheeler.
I'm a very dangerous man.
This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
That's what I'm talking about. Sport.
You ain't never heard nothing like this. Let me work, show me where the mic is. I'm on stage, black shirt, and my Tim's. You know how I do it, I ain't playing with you, I've been grinding. Anybody trying to sleep on me, better do something with your eyelids. I hear a lot of whining, but I don't hear a lot of rhyming. Everybody got opinions, let it go into my ear, then I block that. Put me on stage, I'm a rock that, saying you the best. Stop that, Fooney, I am not that. What are y'all doing out here? What are y'all doing out here? Maybe you should spend a little less time.
Welcome into the Afternoon Sports Drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
I ain't saying I'm the best.
Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you on Friday. Thank the Lord it is Friday.
I don't care what it's.
We made it, and all of you made it as well. So we're going to round out your week here. You're at the right spot. We have a great show planned today. Coach Mike Boynton, OSU men's basketball coach, is planning on joining us around 4:30. He talked about a guy that's been in insane demand ever since all of this OSU basketball news.
And that's what frustrated me is like I had actually put in a request for him on Thursday. You know, that after that, it technically was, I think I actually contacted OSU on my way in to do the show with you on Thursday. And you know, OSU was like, yeah, you know, we'll check his schedule. It'll be either Monday or Friday, or we can do Monday or Tuesday. And then Friday morning rolls around, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to push it. I'll wait. And then I saw, because I was like, I figured that maybe they would keep him off of the media radar for a little bit, so he could digest everything that came out on Friday. But then you see Monday, he was on the podcast with Jeff Goodman. I saw him with the Oklahoma City station on Tuesday, and I'm like, so Tuesday night, I'm like, hey. Can we get him? I requested before. Can we? I know he's in high demand. He's making the rounds. Can we get him in here? And they finally were able to nail down today.
We have to make sure everybody knows that we did, as the station here in our show, try to reach out pretty early.
Yeah.
We know, obviously, and everyone else does too, that big time names like you said, Goodman, and other ones like Oklahoma City, they're gonna be able to snatch him up first, but he is gonna come on, and you know, I know there's a lot more even today to ask him, not just about basketball, but there's a lot of things we're gonna get into, hopefully, that he has. You know, he was a part of that video that Oklahoma State released that's made its rounds on social media. Chuba Hubbard actually got that all going. So
was it Hubbard?
Yeah,
okay,
that's what I was.
Landon Wolf was the one I saw.
Yeah,
and obviously he led off the video. So I didn't know if it was maybe
according to Robert on his show, it was Chuba. But I think Landon had something to do with it as well. But either way, it was very well done. I encourage everyone who has not seen it to go check that out.
Yeah, because I know Landon had actually early on when the protests kind of first started, right after the George Floyd murder, mentioned that he's wanting help from from the black community, the athletic community at Oklahoma State, mentioning even the females as well. We did see one female athlete, and then actually Patsy Armstrong also in that.
Yes.
And that was the part, like it was all impactful. But that's the part that I wanted people to really truly understand. You know, how many people maybe have kids who don't realize that for some races, they're afraid for their children. Her son's going to Princeton. Dude is a genius. He's going to Princeton to play football. They want him there. He's going to get there basically on his brains, and she's fearful of the first time that he's going to get pulled over by a cop, of what could happen to him. And that's that. When I saw that, I'm like, okay, people need to, if you can't understand anything else, understand that as a parent, as a human being, that people are fearful for their children, not just themselves.
Yeah, like I said, it's really important. It's definitely something to take a view, and really I encourage you when you do also to make sure you're in a spot where you can pay attention to the whole thing and really digest it and understand it, and at least try to.
Yeah, because and again, when we have Boynton on later, he's got two small children himself.
Right. Yeah, and he was a part of that. that video. It was very well done. Yeah, so he can give us perspective on all that. And I know, like I said, he's got to be, I give him credit for coming on right now even too, because he's got to be just bogged down by all of this. He knows that something as big as what happened to OSU basketball, that's just the aftermath. Is we're going to have to talk about this quite a bit. But we plan on getting into discussion with him about all of that stuff, because it is still very relevant. It's been like, what, a week now since that news dropped. And
a week from today.
Yeah. Today, and it hasn't really felt like that, but it has already been a week. And obviously, in case anyone is still not sure where we are with all that, OSU is sitting on their appeal process right now, waiting for that to be heard, which, as we've said multiple times on this station, and I'm sure Mike Boynton will talk about it with him too, will reiterate, is not going to be a very quick process. Good OSU news. We talked about Caden Polkovich being taken in the 4th round, possibly, in the MLB draft. Well, he was actually taken in the 3rd round.
Yep.
Even better there for Caden, as he was drafted by the Mariners, Seattle Mariners.
78th overall.
78th overall, yeah. That's and then it was awesome. I saw his tweet today. It said, "Woke up with tears in my eyes this morning. Can't believe, so thankful the Mariners gave me that opportunity." That's how most of them are too. It's like they see something in me, they're going to give me a shot. Yeah. So that's very cool.
And it's interesting because obviously they never played together, but how cool would that be for OSU fans if 3 years down the road you become a Seattle Mariners fan, because right up the middle of their infield is Donnie Walton and Caden Polkovich, 2 Oklahoma State guys.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. I was like, there's another one on there. Oh yeah, Donnie, that's right. Yeah, so definitely got a chance to make that happen, as Donnie found his way into the Major League club a couple of times as well this past season.
Yeah, and actually, somebody asked me last night if speaking of Donnie real quick, where they if they think he's going to have a chance to, if we have baseball, or as Manfred says, when we have baseball.
Yes.
If he would be, if he would be on the roster, and with him, I think it's if there's an expanded roster, which we've heard talks of potentially that being a possibility. So whether it's an expanded full roster, or if they also sequester an X amount of people as reserves in case there's injuries, I think that's the only way right now that he probably plays in the minor or in the major leagues this year, because he was just kind of those almost experimental guys. They brought him up late in last season. He was just kind of the afterthought, because they had a couple of studs who actually did go out there and do really well.
Yeah.
So I think and I think Tom has even made that comment as well, that he probably wouldn't be one of the roster guys unless there was an expansion.
Yeah, it depends on how much the expansion would be, because I think an expansion is probably inevitable. For instance, like the NBA is doing, raising it by just a few players, obviously different sport there, but the MLB could do it, especially for pitchers too. So if that's the case, and there is an extra amount of position players too, maybe he finds a way in there for a shortened season.
But looking at Caden, Jimmy Gillespie and I over the news press were kind of doing some digging last night to try to get some the historical significance. The best. The highest draft for an Oklahoma State player since Jason Hirsch in, I believe it was 14 or 15?
13.
13. Yes. Oh, yeah, okay. Yep. Jason Hirsch, obviously first round with the Atlanta Braves. But we dug even deeper, because I'm like, okay, well, OSU's had some good pitchers. I mean, it's easy to base it off of that. You have to go back to 2006. The highest Cowboy position player, non-pitcher, to get drafted since 2006, when they actually had 2 that were drafted in the supplemental first round. They were both drafted in the mid-50s. You had 2 guys. It was Mike Mangini and Corey Brown, I believe is what his last name. But those were a couple of infielders, or I think one was an infielder, one was an outfielder. But that was the best since then. But he just, for those who maybe are wondering, he finished 1 spot higher than where Jordy Mercer was drafted.
Oh, wow.
So that to put it into context, Jordy Mercer did go on to have a pretty successful MLB career, getting in there. Because, again, the 2 that were drafted in the first round, I don't recognize the names, but Jordy Mercer instantly pops off to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Especially because the damage he did against St. Louis in the division when he played with Pittsburgh for forever.
And then the amount of times that Tom has had him on for Where Are They Now?
Right, yeah.
I think it's typically twice a year.
I was going to say, I've even experienced that once already, so he was great, too. And that was back when, it's funny because we were talking to him then about, I don't know, it was like proposal number 2 or 3 at that time. When we're like on our 6th or 7th one coming up today, hopefully. So we'll get into that later. Speaking of OSU basketball, we didn't talk about this the other day, but Farron Flavors, the grad transfer, made it clear that he plans on staying at OSU regardless of outcome. Rondell Walker, Donovan Williams, apparently, according to GoPokes.com, they said they confirmed reports that they're both also planning on staying no matter what as well.
Right. I
know it's been one of the biggest questions. People ask about where are players going to stay? Is everybody going to leave when all this happens? I think Farron was maybe the one that if I had to put money on it, would have been one I'd say would go.
Yeah,
because
that's definitely who we thought.
Yeah, he's grad transfers, last chance here to make it at an NCAA tournament possibly. But what does that tell you personally? I mean, if Farron is saying, hey, I don't care what's going to happen, I love this team already, I'm going to stick with them regardless. I mean,
well, and that's one thing that Tom has kind of hit on the head every single time we've had this discussion is a lot of these guys are coming to play for Mike Boynton. That's who they want to play for him,
right?
And not even if like with Flavors, he knows that there's a very good chance that he's not going to get to play in the postseason for the first time ever, but he's still sticking out because he wants to play for Mike Boynton. And I think that's the thing that Tom has brought up, and I think a lot of people need to keep in mind, because again, that may be the same with Cade. I've harped on the fact that he's going to get to play with his brother, and that was the kind of the needle that pushed him over when he had his commitment video. It was he said blood's thicker than water, referring to his brother. So that maybe there's hope for those who are worrying about his status. But yeah, no, and actually, our intern over at the News Press is working on it right now. I guess he got access to Flavors. He'll have a story on the News Press website and in the paper in the sports section tomorrow of his decision,
right?
Of deciding to stick around. So I'm going to be I'm going to be interested to see what kind of what it is. I'm assuming again it's that opportunity to play for Coach Boynton.
And again, that's just how powerful Coach Boynton really is to some of these guys, and then what his impact can mean as a head coach. It wouldn't be the same at a lot of schools, and you have to think too. I mean, that's the thing we got to remember. There is and will be schools in the ears of all these players, and probably already has been. As soon as this news dropped, look, we come over here, we got a spot for you. We're going to have a chance to get into postseason play. You're not.
Well, yeah, we saw from, I think it was the Goodman podcast, where he said that at least 20 schools had already contacted Isaac Likely.
Yeah. I mean, that's the case for everybody. Yeah. I would think it's the same for Farron as well, the freshman. And so to hear that news, and again, still doesn't guarantee that they're going to stay, but from their mouths apparently saying that they plan on staying, that's about as good as you can hope for right now, because I can see this happen in a lot of schools with a lot of different coaches, this exact thing, and I'm telling you, the band wouldn't stick together.
Right.
Okay, so we got to give credit to Coach Boynton big time for that, and that's something we're definitely going to talk to him about is, and I'm going to bring it up to him because this is one of the worst times, as we've said, for something like this to happen, not being able to have everybody sit in a room eye to eye and say, here's what happened.
That's literally what he talked about on Friday.
That's awful. I mean, we talk about, it's so funny because we see how bad, first of all, the pandemic was and is, but then we talked about, well, look at all these subplots too that make it even worse because you can't do this and you can't do this, and we realize how important communication is.
Yeah, because I think traditionally the freshmen would be on campus by now.
Yes,
but obviously they're not going to be able to get in until July. So yeah, I mean, it could have been a case where in a normal setting that he could have had that conversation with everyone, including Cade Cunningham and all those freshmen coming.
And that's what you want to do. I mean, you want to sit your team down as a whole, if possible, especially in times like this. And it's almost like a rap session. You say as a coach, well, I'm going to tell you here's what's going on. I want all you guys to voice what you think, what you have on your minds. And it's important at times like this, and unfortunately it couldn't happen that way.
Well, and especially as a coach, because, I'm sure in the back of your mind you're also worried that, what order do you call these players?
Right.
Because at what point do you think, your and I is going to call up likely before you can talk to them. Where if you were in a team setting, you could all everyone hears at the same time. So again, I don't know if that actually happened, but that I'm sure has to be a concern for a coach of especially for someone who said, I want to make sure that they hear it from me, not from Twitter or the social media. But ultimately, they could have potentially heard it from their teammate if it was difficult to get all of them on a Zoom meeting or something in that short of a window.
That's what I also want to know, what his process has been in terms of managing fires here. Because as a coach, you're taught how to put them out. But with all the unprecedented situations going on right now anyways, and then this on top of it, it's like, well, what exactly was his process? Can you imagine getting that news as a head coach and realizing immediately that your first thing you need to do is get a hold of your players? And the last thing you want, just like you said, is for them to get a notification from ESPN that says OSU basketball before their head coach talks to them. How does that make you look as a coach, and how does that make you feel as a player? So you understand all of that too. Like I said, he's going to give us a ton of information on all of that. I'm excited for that interview. Again, that's at 4:30, so make sure to stick around for that. When we come back, the NCAA is encouraging teams to take a day off, believe it or not, and we'll talk about which day that is and how important that ultimately could be. Also, one state is moved much closer. In fact, so much so that it's going to happen in terms of name, image, and likeness for college players. We'll talk about that as well. Still to come on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
It's been a too long time with no peace of mind. I'm ready for the times to get better. I've got to tell you, I've been racking my brain, hoping to find a way out. I've had enough of this continual rain. Changes are coming, no doubt. It's been a too long time with no peace of mind, and I'm ready for the time.
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist along with you on Friday. We got to look into this NCAA news all over the board today. We'll start with the day that they want schools to take off from athletic events and activities, all of that. We got to make sure and clear it up that it's not a rule. It's not a mandatory rule.
Mandate. Because all the national media things that I've seen so far is saying they're mandating. They're mandating.
Yeah.
No, literally, even one of the ESPN PR people sent out just the direct, replying to somebody, just putting the direct quote, didn't actually clarify, but just the direct quote, and the word being used is encouraged.
Yes. Yeah, and that's in the story from Adam Rittenberg, who writes about NCAA on ESPN, and encouraging its member schools to designate November 3rd, the date of the U.S. presidential election.
Elections in general, yeah.
Yeah, elections in general.
Yeah, it is. This is one of the main ones, but yeah.
And obviously, major, national, local races as well, as a day off for all college athletes, so they can go and vote and make that their top priority. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm also for what Mizzou did. They led that march and registered a bunch of their football team other players to go vote. And I said it there, and it's the same thing here. That's the best way to go about change, And to me, it's go make your voice heard. That's one way to do it. I mean, I know you're not literally making your voice heard, but trust me, you are. Your vote counts. I know a lot of people that say, well, what's the point of going out there for my one vote? I promise, it makes a difference.
Yeah, and I can't remember when it was, but I thought I remember reading that in past years, or maybe it was at the beginning of the spring, but I believe OSU football does that with their players as well. So that's good to hear, stuff like that. Again, this was something that I had seen last week. The National Basketball Coaches Association was talking about let's try to make this this day a day off for athletes.
Yes, they were.
And again, that right now NCAA says encourage the member universities and whatnot to make that decision. So ultimately, it's going to come down to programs and universities and athletic departments.
There had been some programs that before this had even made that happen. Obviously, you talked about we're not going to have activities, so this is something to hopefully centralize. Let's go to the phone lines. You're on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Go ahead.
Well, just a quick question. You guys can discuss it. Tell me how your vote counts on that day with the Electoral College. I'll take it off the air.
Okay, thank you. For the Electoral College, that's something I'm going to have to read into more to be able to answer that correctly. When you look at what it is for, as we talked about nationally, we talked about locally and all that as well. I'm going to have to assume that you think of universities too, I think is what he's trying to get at, the students at those universities. With will that count towards a state and all that as well? Is that what you think? That's what he's trying to?
No, I think he's talking about the fact that our last presidential election, the person who won the majority of votes did not actually win the presidency. Yes. Okay. I think that's what he's getting at.
That might be what he's getting at.
And it, I don't. I'm not going to include my opinion on that because I've learned, especially around here, that when it comes to opinion on politics, if you're not talking one way, you're it's not even worth talking. But I understand the premise of the Electoral College, because it is a case where it's to try to allow essentially states like Oklahoma and Kansas that don't have as big of a population to still have be represented. It's to try to the whole representation without or taxation without representation. But yeah, I mean there is valid argument for the fact that if everyone's voting, why do we need to have this electoral college? And it's because of that's why you have swing states, but only a few, but everyone else is solidly left or right.
I'll tell you this, too, to what that caller's saying is, when you look at the states that are going to matter the most here in this upcoming election, too, nationally, we're talking Big Ten states, okay?
To probably the argument that the caller would make before he calls back in, is it fair that it should be that? Yeah. Shouldn't every state be what decides what's most important?
Yes, I mean, from that standpoint, probably so. But when you look at, this isn't the first time that we've talked about that area that I just said being the deciding factor as well. But bottom line is it's going to remain that way. A lot of people have said this, and it's true. You tell me who wins those states, and I can almost tell you who's going to win the presidential election. In a lot of ways. So, but the important part is that at least they're getting this. The thing that I read from this is there's no more excuses. Okay. Now, especially if the universities say that we are going to take place and part in this, and there's not any activities taking place, whatever. To me, that's saying, look, you got to go do it if you want to. And here's my thing with it personally is if you're going to have an opinion, which you have the right to, and you're going to talk about things, fine, that's totally fine, but go back it up in action by voting. Right. Okay, that's when I'll validate what you say. If you tell me something and go off on this or that politically, and then I say, well, did you go to the polls and try to vote in who you wanted? Well, no, I don't vote for whatever reason. I'm like, nah, let's scale that back a little bit. You still have the right to make an argument, but to me, it's not going to hold as much weight personally.
And again, I that's the thing, and I think the caller was bringing it up, and obviously we'll get to sports because that's what led to this conversation. Yeah, yes. But the fact is, if you're an independent or a Democrat in Oklahoma, I can see his argument. Does your vote really matter? Because it's always going to lean Republican. or or vice versa. If you're in California and you're a Republican, does your vote really matter? Because it's always going to typically lean Democrat lately. So I get that argument, and that's why I think there's actually been, although I know it's been more from the Democratic side lately, the push to get rid of the Electoral College. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But at the same time, we're also in a current social state where we're arguing that the status quo for the past 100 years needs to change when it comes to racial injustice. And everyone keeps saying, well, the reason we need the Electoral College is that's how it's always been. Just because that's how it's always been doesn't mean it's always right. And that's something that a lot of people, I'm sure, are debating right now as well when it comes to things such as the Electoral College.
I also saw today, I did actually see this earlier as well, because it brings up this topic. Patrick Mahomes and Tyrann Mathieu are both helping start that voter registration program within the NFL and Chiefs players. That's big. So I got to give credit to it, and that's the thing. There's been a lot of negatives, that have come from all this, and probably still will be. But one of the main positives that you can take from this is that some of the discussion at least has shifted to we got to get out there and vote, because I believe, and I think it might be the same way with those Mizzou football players. A lot of these guys maybe didn't vote in the past for whatever reason, but when they're seeing that the call for it is here, and that we realize what kind of change can be made if you actually go out there and do it, and players as big as Patrick Mahomes and Tyrann Mathieu are getting behind it,
right?
We're going to see some movement, I think, bottom line. So that's what you have to take away from it.
But and again, I know some people have even argued, and I almost agree with this probably, that the election day should almost be a national holiday. Because especially right now, I just saw the Georgia primary where people were having to basically give up the right to vote because they knew that their employers were not going to be okay with them standing in line for 4. There were some reports of people waiting 4 hours to get the opportunity to vote, and especially right now in a pandemic, it's even more alarming. So again, back to the kind of the caller's point, there are a lot of things that you look and say, Is there something wrong with our electoral system? And right now, a lot of people can argue probably, there is. But it is good to bring it back to sports. It's good to see that the NCAA is saying, hey, we can help this by allowing these college athletes, not because some of them may still have to go to class, but at least you're saying now, hey, when you have that window in the afternoon or before the polls close, where you would probably be practicing normally, we don't want you to have to practice. We want that to be used as time to go vote now.
And maybe with more colleges sending kids out there to vote, I mean, maybe the Electoral College and all that, it shifts, eventually, at least the conversation towards it. Let's go back to the phone lines real quick on the afternoon sports drive. Go ahead.
I don't have much, but I've got a fix for all this. They could, of course, it's changing the time of the year and all that, but none of that really matters. Just have vote the Monday after the Super Bowl and just make that a day off.
Well, the Monday after the Super Bowl should be a national holiday anyway, so I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I realize there maybe a lot of people wouldn't go very early in the morning, but they should be able to roll out in the afternoon and go vote. So that takes care of the issues with how unproductive people are that Monday.
Yeah.
And you get votes all at the same time.
Yeah. It's kind of like the NCAA tournament. It reminds me of two of those same days.
But the fear of that is you're bringing up those people who have the same argument that I just mentioned of, well, that's not the normal. We would completely have to change when the president gets technically sworn in and this, that, and the other, because you're going from the end of the year to the beginning of the year when it comes to voting, and then the whole process of the current situation of when you have debates and the primaries and all that stuff. So I like the idea, but I think far too many people would be against moving it that drastically.
Yeah, and they're probably not going to be watching too many primaries if it's going up against football. So,
yeah.
You're probably right.
Well, okay, you just shot down my idea.
But I still like I still think that Monday should be a holiday.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you on that.
That and the election day in general should be national holidays.
Caller, if you can get that somehow moved up into legislation, we'll make sure to have you on all the time.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, that's that day should be a holiday. opening day of Major League Baseball should be a holiday. I've always said that, and
I would argue against that.
You know what?
Now.
Also, because I remember
especially in this summer.
Well, now that they've ruined it,
they've ruined it forever. Yeah.
But I remember when Ozzie Smith came out and said that. He said as much as he was going to try to enact that, like get it pushed up in the law at some point. I was like, come on, Ozzie, but that never happened. That day. And then opening day of the NCAA tournament. I mean, nobody works.
Yeah, that one's a valid one.
That one has to happen at some point. Would I be surprised also before it's all said and done in my lifetime that the Monday after the Super Bowl doesn't become an off day in work? I mean,
I feel like it'd be more possible for that than the NCAA tournament, because I also feel like part of the joy of that day is being, if you actually go to work, of the conversation with your coworkers of whose pool is already busted after game one.
That's true.
Like that's part of. So I mean, that's part of it. That almost take some luster off of it if you're just sitting at home going, well, I guess I'll just keep watching games even though my bracket's busted already.
There's a lot of
shouldn't have Charlottesville going all the way to the championship. There's
a lot of people I know that. Brackets are busted before the tournament even starts, and I try to give advice on that. But
to quote Tom, in the past 5 years, I've never had a broken bracket. I've always been perfect.
Oh, because he doesn't do it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, makes sense. Wait, you or Tom?
Tom doesn't.
Okay,
I don't either.
You don't do it either?
Yeah, no.
Oh my.
The story, and actually, I think it's been 6 years now. No, I think 5 years. What started it was I got married in March 13th, and our honeymoon 5 years ago. We've been married now 5 years. 5 years ago, our honeymoon was over spring break during the tournament and whatnot. We left for Estes Park that Sunday morning, so I didn't even know about what the brackets were until midweek.
Yeah,
because I was enjoying being in Estes Park for the entire week for our honeymoon, and it just kind of became a tradition. I'm just like, you know what, this will be it was kind of my sort of a anniversary gift to my wife, because when we first met, and I'm still a diehard KU basketball fan, but I remember there was one tournament. It would have been when they lost to Kentucky in the championship, when Kentucky had all their studs. I actually I didn't have cable at the time, and she had satellite, and I actually went over to her house just to watch that, and pretty much ignored her. And she still married me, so I'm like, okay, I can at least return the thing and only focus in on KU whenever the tournament started, or hopefully if OSU's in it this upcoming spring.
Yeah, I gotta admit the NCAA tournament is my favorite sporting event of the year. And that's even saying when the Chiefs make the Super Bowl. I mean, I love that. That was the best time ever. But the NCAA tournament, man, I can sit down and watch every game. I do. I'll try to somehow watch every single game. And it's the best time of the year. So
it used to be for me, but then I started covering college wrestling. And I mean, literally the first weekend of the basketball tournament, I hardly get to watch because I'm focused in on wrestling.
Right.
That's the same weekend. And I've enjoyed that much more because, especially with the past few years for wrestling NCAA championships, you can literally watch every single match. And so I would actually, kind of like people do with basketball, I would have my Xbox turned on for my TV. I'd have my laptop, my iPad, and my phone all set up.
Yeah.
Because there would be times where OSU wrestlers would be competing on 4 different mats, and I could just, set each one specifically and follow that. And I was doing it for work, but it was also enjoyable because it would kind of remind me of basketball.
I'm glad you said you did that because I'm glad that I'm not crazy because I've also done the exact same thing for basketball.
Yeah.
Like literally down to the Xbox being the TV on your phone. Whenever they announced that all access March Madness thing, was my life is complete. It was perfect ever since then. But obviously, and that's why it was the biggest devastation for me when it came to sports. People have asked, "What's the thing you miss most about sports?" The NCAA tournament. We were this close, and that was with North Carolina not even going to be in it this year. Okay, and I was still pumped for it. But anyways, their record still stands, as we all know. When we come back, one state, I'm not going to say which one yet, unless people have already seen it. Some may have, but one state has officially signed a bill into law. College players can start getting paid for their name, image, and likeness.
By this time next year.
That is
under the clock for sure now.
absolutely a lot closer than some people realize. Also taking place a lot sooner than some people thought, especially when we talk about there's also bills that we know about in California, Colorado, for instance, that aren't supposed to take into effect until 2023. We're talking this one around next year. We'll talk about which day that is next.
I don't wanna wait for our life to be over. You have it, but you take it how you left it. This is give and take. Take your time, take me under. I want it, but you show me what I'm missing. In the plane out of Southern California, running in the streets all day. I guess some of us just gotta learn how.
Welcome back. Afternoon Sports Drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
I don't wanna wait.
Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you. Don't forget Coach Mike Boynton, OSU men's basketball coach, planning to be on at 4:30. That's coming up. And make sure and stay tuned for that. Right now, we tell you which state decided to move forward quickly as well with name, image, and likeness, and that is, drumroll, Florida. Ron DeSantis in Florida has made it clear that he is for college students getting paid. And again, we have to reiterate this. California people are going to be like, I thought I heard about California. Yeah, California and Colorado also had this planning on putting it into law, but not taking effect until 2023. We're talking about this one taking effect July 1st, 2021. So like you said, almost exactly a year from now. And then I see the initial reaction from Mark Emmert, the NCAA, and he's thinking, you know what? Some athletes might go to some schools like Florida now that would go other places for the reasons like now to make more money. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That's why, Power 5 goes into Congress and says, we need you to make sure this gets moved up. Right. Because the NCAA is taking too long. Yeah. Also, you gotta, if you're in favor of this, you got to give kudos to Florida for making it happen and being so aggressive. And I am. Because even if you're not in favor of it, I told Tom this, I think it was off air, I told him this yesterday, you might as well just get ready for it. It's like one of those things that you might as well just get ready to accept. Because it is going to be taking over college sports sooner rather than later. And that's going to be the case in Florida most likely on July 1st, 2021. Now, again, there's a lot of details that you'd have to dig in and look into. It doesn't necessarily mean, first of all, we have to remember that the schools are not paying these athletes. It's all from third party. And I think there's going to have to be some restrictions, obviously, on who exactly the third party can be. Right. You don't want, some sketchy business, with your school.
I'm curious. I'm assuming that their bill would include that information.
Yeah, and I believe it did. Again, I had to read some more details on it, but I'm assuming that's going to be mainly everywhere with those restrictions. We don't want the local strip club or maybe even bars, for instance, necessarily Miller Lite or something like that jumping on and trying to if you're 21 or older even. So those are going to be things that will restrict some of that. But will this make some players go to Florida, Florida State, Florida Atlantic that would otherwise go other places? Miami, sure. I mean, I would have to think I've made that argument a long time ago. If other schools aren't willing to attempt this, or even states, I should say, and attempt it as soon as Florida is, then it's going to happen. And Congress, that's the thing now. They have a chance to preempt this. Yeah,
and here's the interesting thing is, let me see if I can find the direct quote, because it's a great point that's being made. It was part of the headline. It makes sense for Florida because right now Florida and Texas are the hotbeds for football recruiting and whatnot. Yeah, and this the quote from him after signing the bill. I just want to say Florida is leading on this, and if you're a blue chip high school recruit out there trying to figure out where to go, I think any of our Florida schools is a great landing spot for all of our great high school players. Stay in state. I see people going to Alabama and Clemson, and I know they're good. They've got good programs. But there's nothing better than winning a national championship in your home state. So maybe this will be an added incentive.
Oh yeah, nothing better than
a smart idea.
Nothing better than attempting to win a national championship, and on top of that, making some good money. On the side, literally for what your name is.
Yeah. So I mean, from that standpoint, it is smart for Florida being the first one because they are outside of Texas. I mean, and actually, I looked. I did a story on it when OSU was down in Florida for the Camping World Bowl. That recruiting class that year, I think I did the top 10 or top 20 ranked athletes for that out of that class. Florida had the largest number of the top 20. So, I mean, while we all think about Texas, I think it's because there's more of them. You can go deeper. Where Florida has a lot, they're starting to become a hotbed for the elite ones, and so it makes sense. Because that's the thing we got to keep in mind is, most of these universities, Oklahoma State, OU here in Oklahoma, they get government funding from the state.
Yeah,
it's likely the same thing down in Florida. So the government actually has a vested interest in the success of the athletic programs at those schools. So they're going to push for having NIL in place for trying to keep those great players from Florida in state.
Yeah, and look, some of these businesses, if not all of them, are pumped up right now in Florida. I mean, if a 5-star comes to Florida or comes to Florida State, and you have that opportunity to help make them represent your business.
Oh, especially if it's huge. Yeah, especially if it's somebody who's already from in-state, where because that's the thing is like, I mean, you go down to Texas. I'm sure most people know the 5-stars in Texas. Even if you don't, even if you're in small West Texas town, you probably know who the big studs are in your state that year, and that's probably the same case in Florida. So you instantly have that easy access as a business of knowing that some of the local people already know this kid from their high school days, and now we can instantly, before they even get onto the field as college players, we know that their brand will instantly bring some interest to our business.
That's going to be the best for them. I mean, Chuba Hubbard is sitting in Florida from where, say he's from a hometown in Florida, a little town. And, Jim's Burger says, hey, remember me? Remember when you knew me back when you were in high school? Yeah, come over here and represent my brand. And all of a sudden his business takes off. Chuba Hubbard eats there. I'm going to eat there. So it makes sense. I think, and again, this is not something that's just like, well, maybe we can No, the NCAA has already said that it's going to take place eventually. And it is. It's just states and schools want this to happen sooner.
Right. And that's the thing. I think the significant thing with this is Florida has now put it in place where NCAA has been able to shuffle along because, okay, we have 3 years. We're good. Obviously, you got the government involved. Okay, we know how the government works. So they're going to take a while as well. And then Florida says, boom, you have 1 year from now to make this a reality. That is smart.
That is.
Because here's the thing, and I know Emmert before has said, well, then we may have to look into essentially penalizing, because originally when California talked about it, but that was before the push of, hey, yeah, we're gonna make it a national thing. But I mean, Florida's set itself up to where now it's like, okay, because that's the thing. When recruiting starts up here this spring or later this summer or into the fall, when when the coaches down at Florida State and Florida are now sending out come play for us, they can now mention, hey, you come this time next year, you have a good chance of making money here, maybe not elsewhere though.
Oh, this is a huge plus to recruiting. I mean, it just made it so much better, especially for coaches that were already really good at recruiting. And you're sitting there in Florida right now. This is like, wow, this is big time. You're going to be able to, like you said, sit in that room with that kid and be like, let's remember, we're Florida State, okay? Or we're Florida. We're in the SEC, or we're in the ACC. We're going to compete this year. Our team's pretty damn good. On top of that, I got 3 businesses over here. By the way, their names are pretty important too. You may have heard of them. I mean, insert car dealership here, whatever, that wants to be a part of you, wants you to be a part of them.
Yeah.
Whoa. You got something serious going on there. Let's go to the phone lines. You're on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Go ahead.
Well, guys, let me bring the Electoral College back into the discussion. You're talking about the very same thing here. Nebraska will never have a chance now, nor will hardly any of the other flyover states, It's just unregulated commerce. And California, the coastal schools, maybe Texas, the money's going to be there, and that's where the players are going to go. So it's essentially the same kind of thing, as, or at least similar to some of the considerations from the Electoral College.
Yeah. I think that's why maybe why the NCAA was wanting to put, they kept calling them guardrails.
Yeah. To
almost have a, like, you can cap out at X amount of dollars as an athlete, because then maybe that allows these other states to then compete, because if you're only going to be allowed, say, $100,000, thanks for the call, if you're only allowed $100,000, within a school year, that probably you don't have that drastic of a discrepancy when it comes to, well, people out in California can afford to pay you more. Well, if you're only allowed an X amount of dollars, then you still have a fair and balanced, but you also still get that opportunity for those players to, because that's the thing is you also allow them to choose at times how they want to be utilized in their name, image, and likeness. Because then you can say, well, I want to get all of that $100,000 from a car dealership,
right?
Or you can say, hey, I'll from a couple of, I'm an entrepreneur who wants to get into business, so I actually want to have multiple businesses using my likeness because I want to get a good feel for it. So I think that's what the NCAA was trying to do, but they've just been shuffling their feet so long.
Yeah, and I mean, I see the argument you can make against, like you kind of mentioned, some of the flyover states. And especially in an economy that is primed to bounce back, I think there's going to be some of those states that maybe have some places step up more than you'd think. So I don't know if athletes are, let's say this just passes everywhere, I don't know if athletes are necessarily going to go straight to California or Florida or Texas when, for instance, if in Oklahoma can get more big businesses on board, because we can't act like there's not big businesses around here. There is, but that's also kind of my argument is I'm not hugely in favor of a cap being put on for the players, just because from a capitalist standpoint and economic standpoint, I'm all for all the money being made that's
right.
As possible for these players. So,
but I think that's why the NCAA is arguing against not having a cap, because if you don't have a cap, then you can truly argue that are they really amateurs? If somebody goes to Alabama and they're being paid $5 million in name, image, and likeness, are they really amateurs at that point?
I think the way you could do it is you could still say, well, hey, technically the school isn't paying these guys. I mean, if that were the thing, if they were actually handing money over to these players for coming to play at their school, then yeah, you've crossed the line, I would say. But if a big business too says we're going to give you this much money, and it's a lot of money, as a player, as a coach who has that player on your team, I mean, no one's going to say no to that unless you're just from the outside looking in on a different school.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it. But again, I will reiterate that it's something that's coming. I mean, it for a lot of people, it's a long time coming. That's why I brought up when we talked about Reggie Bush yesterday. People like that were screwed over by some of these things.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if maybe we wouldn't have gotten this far so quickly if because let me get the person, because I think it was a kid from Clemson, because I believe Devin Harper actually quote tweeted it. Because I think part of the problem that you see with NCAA, it was Amari Rogers, who's the Clemson wide receiver, tweeted out, man, the NCAA needs to do something about these summer checks. Got me going sad right now. And I think that's an important thing that maybe they wouldn't have gotten here if, you didn't treat them as such to where they were essentially living like, I get, okay, well, their college is paid for them. Okay, I actually, off record, this has been years ago now, a former athlete, football player, told me that he actually had to pawn off like his Xbox just to afford rent.
Oh yeah, we have to remember that not everyone is at a Power 5 school,
right?
And it's also important to remember that my argument too for them has always been, we have to look at the money that has been made surely off these athletes.
Right. So if something like that where like you could survive during the summer, Like if they didn't suddenly slash your checks during the summer, so that rent money is suddenly dried up because you're not getting what you normally get paid during the school year, maybe they wouldn't have been such a big push for the NIL.
When we come back, Major League Baseball, another new proposal. We'll talk about it next.
Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what.
Hour number 2 of the afternoon sports drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist wrapping up your Friday in the right spot. 4:30, Mike Boynton will be on with us to discuss anything and everything. There's so many topics. I mean, we need like 2 hours.
Including something that he just tweeted out from the Big 12, which, again, we'll hit when we get him in here in about 25 minutes.
Yes, we will. Very important regarding the topic we already discussed. I said yesterday, I think it was, that wouldn't be surprised Major League Baseball came back with a counter proposal today. I haven't heard if they officially have. The one that was released there was details about what it would be. And what that was is essentially the same thing as last time, except instead of a 75% share of those prorated salaries, Major League Baseball has said they are looking to give players 80 to 85%. So they bumped it up to possibly 10% more of those prorated salaries. The initial response to what's going to be to that is what I've heard was we said full prorated salaries, and we mean full prorated salaries. I think I even told you yesterday. I said, what is the Major League Baseball going to do? Come back with 85%? It's exactly what they did. And players aren't, it's just, it's not going to work. I mean, until they get some sort of deal done, and that's why I don't know if it's going to happen, until they get some sort of deal done with a full prorated share, and that would happen if Major League Baseball implemented that 48-game season, which then you get players saying, why would I play 48 games?
Right.
So I don't know, it's like, can you win here as a fan is basically where we are.
No. Yeah, because again, it's getting to the point where, again, they broke Jeff Passan on Twitter earlier this week, and I mean he is at the forefront. I mean he's essentially the Wojciechowski of MLB coverage for ESPN, and actually well respected. He actually originated one of his first big gigs was working at the Kansas City Star. So I mean he's been in had the pulse of MLB for a long time. And it's frustrating for everyone involved, especially from the outside looking in. Of what more do you need? What more do you need right now?
It would be a 72-game season. Players, it says now, that would max out at 80% of those prorated salaries. So originally the report I saw was up to 85%. Now it says it'll max out at 80%, which is a little bit less there.
And I saw USA Today MLB beat writer already tweeted out about 45 minutes ago that the players are expected to decline it before Sunday's deadline.
Yeah, that's not surprising to anybody. They've stood by. I'll give them credit. I mean, they've stood by making it clear that it's 100% or no deal. I'm not even sure if the owners came back and said, fine, 90%, that they would still be like, it's 100% or no deal. I'm afraid that's at the point to where we are here. They did also include an expanded playoffs, which is what MLB players wanted anyways as well, from 10 to 16 teams. So you get that on there. So I think are they really trying to say, hey, we did that for you? Can't that be good enough? I mean,
and again, I literally said it yesterday. It seems like we keep flipping every single proposal that comes out. Like at a certain point, it's getting to the point now where, like, how much money does every single player need? Because now you're saying now we want more players to get more money because of the postseason as well. It's like, man, I mean, talk about greedy.
And I don't like to use that word, but it is. I mean, it's just, there's no way around it other than that is and it's, it's been both sides. I mean, I'm not going to pick a side here, but you and I, it's like talked about, I've been on different sides every single time with some of these proposals as they continue to go back and forth. So again, I would say we're not necessarily that much closer to a deal being done. and then people are going to be like, I thought you said Rob Manfred said there would be a season. Yeah, but I think he's going off of, if need be, he will go to that 48-game season, regardless of what everybody thinks, which, as we know, players won't be very happy about that either. So yeah, that's where we are with Major League Baseball. Not really much traction. I stand by what I've said during this whole thing. As a Major League Baseball fan, I'm completely embarrassed. I think the league should be too, because they're not helping themselves. They're not helping themselves with fans. Individual players are not helping themselves with fans. Fans are going away from baseball. I mean, this is driving them away. And we've had that on the show. People have called in and admitted that's the truth. They're not as interested anymore in this. If this is how it's going to be, why should we care? And I get that. I get that argument from those people, especially that aren't huge diehard fans, like I am. So it's understandable. I would not want to be, and I'd be saying the same thing if it were the National Football League or the NBA. If they were back and forth on this too, it'd be like, this is embarrassing, guys. You can't get this going, at least for the fans. Let's go.
And again, I think, as we've mentioned, what's making it worse is the fact that you're seeing MLS is narrowing down. NHL has a date of when their training camp's going to start.
Yeah.
And literally, because that's the thing is, like, as you've mentioned, and everyone keeps saying, the further every day that passes, the less games you're going to be able to play in MLB, because you still have to get to training camp, do a training camp, do quarantining, all that stuff to make sure that no one comes back, and tested positive. So, I mean, there's so many layers that they still have to do just to restart and just to start their season, that, the fact that these contract negotiations just keep getting pushed further and further.
Yeah.
It's, again, I'm almost getting to the point where I almost disagree with Tom. He says it's going to be an 11th hour thing where it's going to get done. At what point can you say with MLB that because I thought by the start of June you need to have an idea, so you can, that was to start by beginning of July. At this point, if MLB or if NBA isn't even planning on starting until the end of July, how is MLB going to start in time to get done by either the middle of September or before November?
Right, which they said ultimately that's where they have to be done. The owners have said we have to finish by towards the end of September. We can't go past that. And I think it's still ridiculous how long the NBA is planning on waiting until they start. But with baseball, we should right now, on Friday, June 12th, have some sort of baseball being played. Preseason, whatever, or spring training or whatever. But it should be happening right now. There is no excuse anymore to be sitting around arguing back and forth on this. And it's just like you said, there's all this that has to take place even before it all gets started.
What's crazy to think is we have college athletes that are back practicing, and MLB isn't even in spring training yet.
Yeah, we
literally talked about how it was going to be easier for the MLB because you can create within your union of because we're risking our health, we can go through as long as we get that. And again, they're still doing that obviously, but like we already have college athletes who really don't have a union who are already just back at practice being some of them being tested positive.
We have Little League Baseball occurring everywhere.
Yeah, we've got Casey Kendrick getting kicked out as a coach.
Casey Kendrick is getting kicked out of Little League Baseball games, and we can't even get Major League Baseball started. Little League sports have started to take place in Oklahoma. They've taken place in Missouri, I know, Florida, all over this area. And we have grown men arguing back and forth. I said it, you said it.
About money.
That we said players would probably be the first to bend. The fact that they're staying as solid as they are on this nothing less than 100% thing, it's like, seriously? Because I've disagreed with Tom the whole time when he talked about a last minute thing. The only way that would happen is if owners said, okay, well, on the last minute, you get full salaries. That's it.
What happens, though, when they say full, and then you have like the NBA players right now is like, that one player, I don't want to risk my, I don't want to risk the health. If, Mike Trout suddenly comes out, it's like, I get I'm getting all my money, but, I've got a kid on the way. I don't want to risk my wife and the newborn. So I'm not playing because for health issues. That's, I guess, where I'm thinking is this is leading ultimately is the players are trying to essentially say, no, we don't want to play. But instead of, basically kind of using the money negotiation, instead of coming out and looking like wimps by saying, we don't want to play because of the health scare, which I think is if that's the case, it's fair in their own right to do that.
Yeah, they have the right. What they need to do is just like the NBA and say, fine, but we just won't pay you for those games. I mean, that's the best solution the NBA has come up with since all of this started, really, in my opinion. Let's hit our break early here. We'll get one in and get back, and then we'll get one more before 4:30 when Mike Boynton's going to join us here on the afternoon sports drive. We talked about yesterday the NBA. There were players that were, we kind of lit into them a little bit, I think rightfully deserved, that talked about how they don't want to play. Some of them don't want to play. They're worried about a lot of different things in Disney World. Yeah, Disney World. We'll talk about the response the NBA gave them next here on the afternoon sports drive.
She like my futuristic sounds in the new spaceship. Futuristic if it's Philip Cake. She never need a man, she what a man need. So I keep on falling for her daily. We was at Coachella go.
Afternoon sports drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler, Jason Elmquist. Friday, Coach Mike Boynton coming up in 12 minutes. Have him on with us. Only fitting that we talk basketball before that happens. Yesterday, we talked about the NBA. Players said, all of a sudden, after everything seemed good with Disney World, well, we have our concerns about Disney World. And, I get it. I get from the player's perspective that, and I said it, it doesn't really make sense anymore to do Disney World. The travel is one thing you worry about. It's going to be on, you have to remember, it's going to be on private jets and all this. It's not like they're circulating amongst the public too much. So I think it's doable, especially when they're talking about getting back on almost August 1st. It's doable to me to play like normal for the most part, just without fans. So I get kind of that, argument about it, but I don't understand what they talked about yesterday with, well, we can't be here because we just don't know how it's going to go with all of us in this tight little bubble, and it's just not the way to live. And I'm like, come on, calm down. So the NBA said in response, hey, just so you guys know, 14 of the 22 teams that are coming, by the way, will be there for 53 days. They will be gone after that. 53 days is what they're asking here. So that's not too long of a time. The 6 teams in that possible play-in tournament for that 8th seed that could definitely happen, they would be able to leave in as little as 30 to 45 to 40 days, for instance. Those teams that we just talked about that wouldn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And the finals are set for September 30th. That's also the worst part, is that, look, they're going to be there during all of this. They're going to be competing for ratings so bad. The NBA was the one sport that ratings tanked in the last few years because people realize, it's just true, people realize nothing matters really until the postseason anyways. And there's 3 or 4 teams that matter all year long?
Yeah.
If we're being honest. So it doesn't help.
Because if they get back August 1, and that was just to start training, right? That wasn't or like the quarantine and all that other stuff. That wasn't necessarily to start on August 1, like games-wise, right?
Yeah, I believe actually they're planning on playing first game, June 30th or whatever that is. They're coming back mid-July, or July 31st.
Yeah.
Mid-July, I believe, is when they're planning on doing all their camps.
And see, that's either way, the thing is, Come August 1, everyone's already talking at that, especially now that we heard yesterday that the NCAA its original committee has passed a 6-week window for college football athletes. They're going to be allowed basically 6 weeks to prepare, with a minimum of, you have to practice 4 weeks before you can start your season. That people are going to be focused by August 1 on, hey, college football's here. We can start talking about it. Media is going to, ESPN's going to be cranking up their coverage. Locally, we're going to be talking about it. Whether it's in the news press or here on radio. Like, NBA is going to be an afterthought.
Yeah, that's why when
they restart.
That's why I'm saying another reason to argue against how long it's going to take, because it could be, if they were doing it right now, this is ideal. To come back like normal. Finish up here in June, late June, even into mid-July if you have to, and leave football for football. Because just like you said, we all know where it's going to go. Where the even Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma City has a chance here I don't know how realistically they do to ultimately get all the way, but I'm curious. And people listen to our show, are they going to be caring as much about Oklahoma City at that point, or is it going to be about Cowboy football? Let's be honest.
Right.
So,
which brings an interesting question. I'm going to be curious. How is NBA going to allow press coverage of those games?
Yeah. Is it just going to be ESPN? Like the only source is going to be watching it, or the ESPN coverage on ESPN.com? Is Associated Press going to be at least? And that's because that's the thing is with it being centralized down in Florida, it's not like because again a lot of papers are now hurting from the pandemic and whatnot. I mean, most of them that typically would cover the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Chicago Bulls or whoever, they may be difficult. They may be too tough to try to send them down there. So I mean, there's a lot of questions, and the longer they take, it's the more difficult it is for people because that's the thing is I don't watch every game, but sometimes I like being able to go back and read up on it. Yeah. And sometimes the local coverage angle is better than ESPN because ESPN's if it's not LeBron James, they don't care. They don't put any flair into it. Interestingly enough, with ESPN, their studio programming, by the way, hit a 41-year low in ratings. This was just announced today.
I'm not surprised.
So
you can only handle so much of SportsCenter and nothing else.
Well, and people argue that there's no sports, but trust me, it's been this way for a while.
Yeah.
And I think they're really banking on these games helping the overall ratings, but also they know they're probably banking on, guys need sports. People need sports to watch. Yeah. They need NBA. But let's be honest here. When you're competing with the mega giant, of college football and eventually the NFL.
Yep.
And possibly baseball on top of that. And hockey? Good luck. Yeah. We have to take our break because when we come back, Coach Mike Boynton will be on with us here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. That's next.
Yeah, that's what I've been on. Yeah, that's what I've been on.
Welcome back. Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist with you as we continue on here on Friday. As promised, Coach Mike Boynton joining us on the show. Coach, thanks for taking some time out of your day for us. I know that you're always a busy man, but this past week in particular has to have been very hectic.
Thank you guys for having me, man. I've been busy. There's a lot of really important things going on, both inside our program and out. And, it kind of comes with the responsibilities of the job. So I'm excited to be here and look forward to having this conversation with you guys.
Yeah, and actually, I reached out to Steven on Thursday because we wanted to have, obviously, we cover sports, and obviously it's a very diverse community when it comes to sports, especially at the college level and pro level, and that was kind of the focus. And obviously Friday came around and a lot of the story became about the news from NCAA, but I still wanted to make sure that we got you on here to talk about the stuff that's impacting everyone, and not just people here in Stillwater and Oklahoma State from Friday. So I wanted to talk with you about that, lead off with that. And obviously I saw you at the protest here at Stillwater last, I think it would have been Wednesday. And I guess first off, what was your initial reaction and your impression of how that went over there in front of the police department here?
Well, personally, I was really pleased with the organization, the structure. I thought that people obviously behaved in a very, civil way. I think it's what a peaceful protest is supposed to look like. People obviously trying to bring a call to attention of something that they feel needs to be highlighted at the moment. And I thought Stillwater did it as well as I've seen anybody else, considering, obviously there's not a ton of diversity here in this city, this town, if you will. But that, people of all different backgrounds would show up and let's listen to one another and kind of show that sense of community. It was really, really important for me to be there. And I'm glad that the organizers put it together, and I look forward to seeing what the next steps are.
Yeah, and obviously you're in a unique opportunity because you interact with both OSU PD and Stillwater PD and whatnot. Has there been any interaction or reach out to you of with how great of a speaker you are, of you possibly going to talk to some of the officers about the current situation?
No. I mean, no one's reached out for me to speak to the officers in particular. We do have a very good relationship with really law enforcement at all levels in this area, starting with our on-campus police officers. The chief of police, Leon Jones, is a great friend of mine, somebody that I actually really admire for the leadership that he shows, the job he does on campus, looking out for all the students, certainly the student athletes, but all the students. But also here in Stillwater and Payne County, those officers have also been very kind and helpful to us in my time here. I can't speak of anything before, but I know I've had a really enjoyable experience with all the officers and the leadership at each department. And so maybe that time will come. Obviously there's a lot going on for everyone.
Right.
And maybe now is just not the time for me to go speak. But if I'm asked to, I certainly wouldn't mind at least getting in front of them and giving them just a different perspective. I'm not in position to tell them how to police. I don't know that. I'm not trained in that area. But just to maybe see it from the community side, from the civilian side, just what people think when they're in my position.
Yeah. How difficult has it been for you with your players because of the fact that you're not able to get the interaction with them that you normally would because of the pandemic ongoing, but also still allowing them and still trying to help them still have their voice during this time?
Yeah, COVID-19 really has complicated everybody's life, just because of either you had to go out of business as a business owner, or you had to limit the way your business was operating, or if you were an athlete, like in our case, we were in the middle of kind of a decent little run at the end of the season, and it abruptly came to an end. And certainly the worst is people have died in this deal. And so our guys being away from us hasn't allowed us the opportunities to continue to build in them the confidence to do great things that we normally would. But we've stayed in contact, via Zoom, via text, via phone, as much as we can. And, as things like the racial tension that has kind of arisen in our country has come up, we just kind of talk with them like we always do. Here's what we want to do. We want to listen to you, hear what you may have, specifically in your personal life going through with your family, but also give you an opportunity to participate in the change that we all want to see moving forward.
Yeah. Now, I know I listened to Robert's show last week. Dion Amade was on and said something that kind of stuck with me. And as a member of the sports media, I wanted to kind of get your opinion and, kind of how you feel that sports media could possibly maybe help if you think it's the way. But when you were announced as the head coach, obviously I was there. I wrote a column. I didn't even bring up the color of your skin. It was just my impressions of you as a human being and as a coach and as a person. But there were a lot of media entities that mentioned how you're the second African-American coach for Oklahoma State. In your mind, is that something that the sports media maybe needs to get away from, is pointing out that aspect when it comes to positions of power, whether it's the new head coach or an AD or whatever? Because of the fact of the matter is, when we're writing down your resume, you don't put down your race. You just talk about where you were as a coach, your college degree, and stuff like that. Is that something that, in your mind, maybe sports media needs to get away from doing?
I don't know. I would kind of push back on that a little bit, because I think pointing out the significance of what is progress, right?
Right.
That's important. Is very well within reason. The things that I have more an issue with is when I hear, and I've heard this probably all my life since I was about 12 years old. Man, he speaks so well, or he's very articulate. I would hope that I would be able to have some grasp of the English language at 38 years old, and that I would be able to put a couple sentences together without that being something that needs to be highlighted, right?
Right.
Let's just give me, that's kind of going off now, but that's kind of what privilege is in many ways, that people just can't accept. The assumption isn't that when I open my mouth, you'll just be able to understand what I'm saying.
No.
Whereas you would never say, you would very rarely mention a white head coach at 35 years old being well-spoken. You would just assume that if he's gotten a job as a head coach in the Big 12, that he could speak well.
Right.
And, those are more the things. I think the significance of me being the second black coach in the history of our program again, a sign that OSU is accepting of doing things a little bit different and willing to step out in a way where, maybe there'll be some criticism of that. But we have to continue to look at people for what they are, who they are, what they stand for, the things that they believe and work at, and kind of get away from the bad assumptions on what people may not be capable of because of the way they look.
Coach, how important was it for you that the Big 12 announced that they mandated a day off on Election Day for men's basketball players? I don't know about you, but I've always said that voting is one of the best ways to get your voice heard.
Oh, there's no question about it. And I'll be honest, I didn't always understand that. I wasn't brought up in Brooklyn. We just didn't talk about politics at home. It just wasn't something that was at the forefront of our dinner table discussion. So as I've gotten older and started to understand the impact that those decisions, in starting with voting, can have on the way I live, the opportunities for my children to go to good schools, to get good health care, at least access to it, are critical things. And again, I would always tell people, we always look at the national and the presidential election and the national elections. And really, it starts locally. Yeah. And as it relates to this policing, you have an opportunity to elect judges who help, adjudicate cases. And you have an opportunity to select your chief of police, or he's appointed. But, things at the local level, which really, really make a difference.
The county sheriff.
And a lot of times, those decisions are really made by very few people because they don't pay that much attention to the local races. So the pendulum could swing very easily if more people get engaged in that process.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, I know NCAA obviously kind of came out, said they're encouraging athletic departments to do that, trying to get athletes out there registered to vote. Is that something that your program had done in the past, or are working on making sure that everyone that comes through your program is you make sure that they're registered?
No, we haven't made it a conscious, intentional effort. We've talked about it. We've talked about the importance of it, but we haven't followed through. And that's one of the things that I'm going to take responsibility for. That's part of my job, is to help these guys understand, because it's one thing to tell an 18-year-old kid, hey, man, you just turned 18, you can vote now. But if he's like me, he doesn't even know what that means when I was 18. Yeah. Where do you go? How does it work? Where do you vote? How do you vote? What am I voting for? Yeah. Who am I voting for? What's important when you vote? And so those will be conversations that, as we move forward, we want to have in an open and honest way. And not that we want to tell people how to vote or who to vote for, but we want them to understand the process and its effects.
Is that something that you can see possibly growing, at least within your program, of beyond having, talks about sports, but of having debate about, the political landscape, especially, like you said, locally?
Sure, absolutely. I think it's an absolute responsibility of mine, just as it is making sure we've got a good game plan when we go to K-State. Just as it is when I make sure that our kids go to class every day and can show that they're interested in learning and not just making three-pointers. All those things are vitally important, and I've got to be the leader. I've got to own it all, and that's just something I'll be more conscious of moving forward.
Coach, let's get down to some brass taxes here about with basketball. First thing here, I know a lot of people and fans and everyone that listens to our show, they immediately hear, the possibility of a postseason ban. Let's start off with where you think personally the appeal process is headed, and how confident you are in a positive outcome.
I'll say this, because you never know when things are outside of control. You got to be careful how aggressive you want to put your thoughts out there. Yep. But I do understand, just from being on the inside, we've got a very strong case to appeal, which what we think was an overreach on punishment. When you strip this thing down to its bare bones, even by the NCAA's and the Committee on Infractions' own reporting, we don't have an atmosphere of bad practices. We don't have a lack of institutional control. We don't have a group of people trying to circumvent the rules and get an advantage. In fact, they say the opposite. We complied. We worked with them diligently for 3 years now. We were honest and open. we showed that we do have control of our institution and what the people do in it. We didn't gain an advantage through any of this activity was done. And what it comes down to is we had a person doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing. And so we took corrective action immediately, and we can go and say, you know, at that point, what else do you want us to do? You know, we didn't benefit anyway, and so we feel like we'll have an opportunity to go defend that case and make a strong inference that those penalties certainly need to be lessened.
I know towards the end of your teleconference on Friday, you had mentioned basically kind of wanting to spearhead change within the NCAA so innocent athletes aren't being penalized. And you went out and said, you know, that you also want to make sure that it doesn't happen to future programs. I know it's only been a week, but have you started brainstorming some possibilities that you can maybe spearhead to try to maybe make a movement within the NCAA?
Yeah, I have. I've had some private discussions with some other coaches about things, other guys who maybe have been through similar experiences. I'm not in a position to share those specifics at this point yet, but I'll say the premise of it is, if we're going to stand up as people involved in college athletics, and we're going to say with straight faces and try to make people believe that we do this for athletes, and I would guess that 99% of the people who are involved in college athletics, if they were asked why they're involved in college athletics, is because they want to have a positive impact on young people's lives and help provide good opportunities for them to continue to do great things. And this decision flies in the face of that. And so my message is, we've got to do better. We've got to be honest about what we're doing here. And in my mind, this wasn't about the kids. In fact, the scholarship reduction directly negatively impacts kids. There are less scholarship opportunities for kids because they can't come to Oklahoma State as an option. And to play an NCAA tournament is a big deal. That's what kids want to go and play college basketball to do ultimately. And again, you're talking about guys who, you know, in our incoming freshman case, were high school freshmen when this stuff was going on. Yeah. And it's just got to be a better way to show that we really care about doing the right thing by kids, and not about repositioning ourselves in within the power structure over the jurisdiction, which in our case was taken over by the FBI.
Speaking of those athletes, obviously things can change between now and when enrollment starts in here in I guess just a couple short months. But you've already had several guys who have already come out and in support and saying, you know what, we're sticking to our commitment to Oklahoma State. How big has that been for you to see those guys already come out and you know, make it vocal that they aren't bailing ship?
It's huge. It makes me want to go fight even more vigorously to defend them in this case. You know, and I think it shows that, at least from my standpoint, the kids feel like when I say it's about the kids, that I mean it, and that my actions follow up those words. We tell these kids that when they come to school, they're going to be loved and cared for, that they're going to be challenged and pushed, that education is important. Our team had a 3.75 GPA this past semester, following up a 3.01 GPA in the fall semester of 2019. And so, you know, we actually mean what we say when we're here to serve student athletes and give them opportunities to have success later on in life. And I think their decisions individually show that they believe in what we say and how they're treated here. And for our incoming guys, they felt that we were genuine in our presentation to them, and they look forward to continue to come here and put that uniform on and wear it proudly.
Coach Mike Boynton, OSU basketball, joining us here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. You kind of hit on it there too, Coach, with talking about other coaches that have been in contact, and that was going to be my question. Was when this broke, we know that, you know, media has obviously given their reaction, and we've all given our reaction, writers and everything like that. Were there coaches that reached out immediately to you about all of that?
Oh yeah, I've had several. I won't, you know, call them out because those are private conversations, but. I mean, I would say no less than 36 coaches have reached out and complete, you know, one, kind of shock, knowing what the NCAA reported or the details of our case, that the punishment would be handed out in such a harsh manner. Two, to just support me and tell me, hey, we can get through this. And B, and lastly, to say, hey, you know, if there's anything I can do to support you through this deal, let me know. And so, you know, the coaching community has been really, really strong in my favor, and I appreciate all those guys who have reached out. And things they didn't even know. You know, you kind of look at how we've done things and the things we've been through in my first couple of years as a head coach, that we're truly trying to do things the right way here at Oklahoma State.
Coaches know when they go in, especially at this level, that they have to expect anything and be able to handle anything. With times as unprecedented as this, I mean, not just the postseason ban and all of that, but in the NCAA news, with everything going on socially, how do you maintain structure with your team with all this?
Well, the first and foremost is I remind myself every day that this isn't about me. I've got a job to do, first and foremost, to be an example to my kids, the guys on my roster, of what taking responsibility looks like. And I'm not talking about taking responsibility for what other people do, but what my job is, right? We talk about accountability every day. We talk about discipline. I have a tremendous job. I work for great people, and I work in a great program. So every day, my job is to show up and give them everything I have. And no matter whether things are going great for us or things are not so great at the time, I've got to stand up and hold my head high, knowing that we're doing things the right way and we're serving the people we're supposed to serve. And that we'll continue to do that. I look forward, like I said, to going and defending our case and getting these guys back on the court and giving them an opportunity to compete.
Kind of building on that, obviously when that negative news comes out Friday, it could have been easy for you to just, go hide in a bunker or something. But you came out starting on Monday, you were, national podcasts, and you've made sure that your voice is heard and leading during this. How important in your mind was it to not just kind of sit back and cower in the corner because, this woe is us, but instead going out there and kind of making sure people know, hey, no, this wrong needs to be righted?
Well, I don't know if I can measure the level of importance as much as I can assure you I don't know anything different. From the time I took the job, and to be honest, it wasn't met with a whole lot of optimism. In fact, there's probably more people skeptical of it than anything. I've never turned down an interview. I've gone out and met people and tried to show, hey, listen, just give me a chance. I can do this job. And that's no different now. My job is to stand up and represent this program. And so just because things are a little bit difficult doesn't mean that I get to change my behaviors. And like I said, my job is to be an example to the guys on my team. To mention, I've got a 7-year-old son who watches everything I do and listens to every word I say. And my example to him is a great one. I take the responsibility of being a mentor and leader to our players just the same as I take as being an example and a dad to my son.
Speaking of the kids, I've got to ask, since we kind of talked about the pandemic, how has home life been for you and your wife, basically kind of having to do some homeschooling over the last few months?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. My wife, she was definitely a champion in this deal. She's organized, much more organized than I am. She's much smarter than I am, and she certainly spends more time handling our kids because of the nature of my job and how much I travel. She's been tremendous and really gave us an opportunity to finish getting our kids through their school year. And I was just lucky to be able to stay out of the way and not getting in trouble too much now. I will say I learned how to go to the grocery store a little bit more. The first time she sent me out, it took me about an hour and a half to get 3 things because I didn't know where anything was. And I, the first few times you're scared to ask, you want to embarrass, and I just started asking people, hey, I need help. I got to get back home. My wife is expecting me to get home with some, Vaseline or some bleach or something, and I have no idea where to find it.
Coach, it'd be remiss not to bring up Cade Cunningham here. I know that we've seen, like you talked about, Farron came out and then said he still plans on staying. Rondell as well, and Donovan. Can you give us any sort of update on where Cade is with all of this and maybe where he's thinking about going in any direction with this?
Yeah, I don't know if he's got a firm decision yet. And at the time he's comfortable making that decision, he's going to have the space and opportunity to do so. But there's no question, right? He's been at the top of my mind ever since this decision came out. He was the first kid I called because I know the significance of this for him, being that he was only planning on playing in college for 1 year. But we've been in consistent communication daily. I feel good about our relationship and that he knows that I'm going to support whatever he decides to do. The one thing I do know about Cade is he's a highly competitive kid. And he chose to come to Oklahoma State because he believes in this place. He believes in our fans. He believes in the guys he was going to be able to play with next year. And there's still a lot of those things that are on the table for him. Now, he's got more options than probably anybody else in the program, but I look forward to just providing him some clarity on what all the options mean. And look forward to getting with him, again tonight, talked to him this morning, as we continue to just kind of go through what it all means. What are the positives? What are the negatives? And I feel like here sometime and maybe the next week we'll have some concrete information.
Obviously, a lot of things have happened over the past 2 to 3 weeks, but we also need to, I feel like we need to go back, since we have you on here, before everything has happened, with the passing of Eddie Sutton. For you, obviously, being a men's basketball coach at Oklahoma State, what was your time like with him when I don't know if he was still able to talk when you first started, but the impact that he has had on this program that you're now leading.
Yeah, so Coach obviously was in the final leg, right, when I took over, and I got to spend some time with him during my first year. In fact, in my first couple months on the job, I went to his house, and he was talking a little bit then. He still had some fire in his belly, I guess, if you would, and I remember him being very specific. He didn't say a whole lot, but what he did say was, "I believe in you. Play defense." And so I'm trying to hear that in the back of my mind every time we give up like 40 points half or something like that. I'm like, man, Coach Sutton's going to rip me if he gets a chance to talk to me again. But this is, I've said it time and time again, this is his program. I'm so fortunate that I get a chance to walk the same sidelines that he did, to hopefully have the same type of impact on players that he did. Get a little bit of an advantage because Scott's on the staff, so I get a little bit of kind of secondary feel of Coach Sutton on the bench with me every game. And, he just was such a great man. All of his former players. I haven't met a single one of his former players. Now, he was demanding, but they all knew that he loved him. And that's the kind of coach that I aspire to be. And if we happen to win at the same level, that'll be icing on the cake. But I certainly want my players to think of me the way Coach Sutton's players thought of him.
Now, obviously, there's been a lot to think about lately, but and I don't know if this is a discussion that you are a part of, but is there any discussion of whether it's initials on the jerseys or anything for this upcoming season to pay tribute to him?
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to give out any specific details, but certainly Coach Sutton will be honored in this program this year and every year moving forward. So I look forward to having an opportunity to discuss those things in detail. But just know that everyone here within the university recognizes his impact and how much he meant, and we'll never let his memory or spirit go away from our program.
Last thing here, Coach, before we let you go, I told Jason earlier, I said this has got to be the worst time, I believe, for some news like OSU got, just simply because you can't sit down everybody in your team and then get them all together and kind of have a little rap session about all this. And what was your initial response in terms of trying to get a hold of everybody on the team, and what was your message to them immediately after this news broke?
Yeah, so I went in immediately. My job is to protect these kids and provide them clarity and information, and their families the same. And so I made a conscious effort to call everybody personally. I didn't have the staff or assistant coaches make the call. I made the call myself, got in touch with everybody, tried to make sure I did it before the announcement came out. And since then, it's just been what do we think the process looks like, Coach? What can we do? And I think many of these guys want to stick together and fight with one another. And that gives me great confidence and even more fuel, if you will, to go and fight for them. So it hasn't been the best time, in large part because of what you said. Everybody's home with their own families, dealing with COVID. Many of them in places dealing with protests because of the racial tensions that are going on. So it's certainly not an ideal time. I don't know if there is an ideal time, but those other issues certainly have complicated things for us for the last week. But because of the relationships on the front end, you feel like you have a chance to survive it.
Coach, thanks so much for joining us, giving us some of your time.
No problem, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me on, and look forward to being back and You guys enjoy your weekend.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
sir,
enjoy
you
your weekend and have fun with the kids.
Okay.
All right, Coach Mike Boynton joining us here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Again, can't thank him enough for giving some of his time to us. I know that's he's been a busy man, especially in the media, and the radio world and everything else. I like his answer to that last question. He feels like the team is still all about each other, and they want to stay strong in this. And then saying, hey, what can we do? What can we do to help out and make this go more smoothly and all? I don't know. I try to put my mindset in what I would do if I was Coach Boynton when that happened, and try to keep everybody on board. I think I would be, my fault would be I would panic too much and be like, I'm going to lose guys. But he comes out and says, and that's why he's also very confident in the way he recruits guys and the relationships he forms with them to ultimately, keep guys around even in situations like this.
Well, I mean, and again, that's what's made him a great coach, a great recruiter, a great leader of young men, is that, as he said, there's no panic even under the worst of times. He finds a way to, and that's the thing is, I mean, that takes a lot. I mean, we saw it again, bringing up Eddie Sutton. I mean, he, had troubles with alcohol because of that, all that stress that was put on him. So, again, but he mentioned, obviously he's got a great wife, home base that I'm sure helps kind of keep him grounded as well. But, again, I remember writing the column when he first was hired. I know he mentioned the fact that, probably not a lot of people were expecting a lot from him. I actually was. I was one of those at the end of my column. I remember saying, if he's with the impression I got from him is if he was as good with that with recruits and coaching, people are going to be asking how we get that lucky. And I think right now a large section of the OSU fan base is thinking exactly that.
Yeah. That's going to do it for us here on the Afternoon Sports Drive here on Friday. Again, big shout out and thank you to Coach Mike Boynton. I'll get that interview cut and we'll have it on the YouTube page shortly, very, very soon. In case you joined late and didn't get to hear the entire thing, he gave a lot of good answers. He also said, maybe next week he gets some more solid information on Cade, for instance. I think that's big. Maybe even sooner than some of us thought. At least he might know. We might not, but he will. Yeah. And that's definitely a step forward in knowing his process there. So thanks to Coach Mike Boynton. Thank you to Jason Elmquist, obviously, right over there. And I'm Patrick Wheeler. We'll be back here on Monday for more of the Afternoon Sports Drive. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you then.